Hello students, welcome to Byju's IS. Welcome to a session on economy this week, wherein we'll be taking up some of the very important economy related articles and we'll be analyzing these particular articles. For this particular video, I've chosen the time period from 6th of April to 19th of April 2020, and the articles that I've chosen are from Hindu, Indian Express, Business Standard, Live Mint and Business Line. Let's begin the discussion. The first article is related to WMA, stands for Ways and Means Advances. Now, some of the very important points before understanding what is given in the article are: first, under the concept of ways and means advances, government can borrow from RBI. Which government? Central government as well as state government. We'll be focused on central government because that is more important here. In the recent times, as a result of the pandemic or the economic disruption that has been caused by the pandemic, the receipts or the incomes of the government has come down, the expenditure has increased. So there is a difference between the expenditure as well as the income generated. And this particular gap is widening because the expenditures are shooting upwards. Now, in order to meet these particular differences between the receipts and income, but more importantly, the short-term differences between the incomes as well as the expenditures, RBI will lend to Government of India. I'll repeat the statement again. To meet the mismatches between the receipts as well as the expenditures, for a short duration, RBI will lend to Government of India. This particular lending is referred to as ways and means advances. Under the concept of WMA, central government can borrow from RBI for short duration, that is up to 90 days. And the limit under this, that is basically there will be a limit fixed. Only up to this particular limit, the central government will be allowed to borrow. Can central government borrow beyond this particular limit also? Definitely yes, it will be allowed. Let me give a very simple example. Let's say hypothetically, the limit is 1.2 lakh crore rupees. So central government can borrow for a duration of 90 days up to this particular amount from RBI. And what will be the rate of interest charged on such borrowing? RBI will be charging repo rate. Remember this, RBI will be charging the repo rate on such borrowings to Government of India. Now, can Government of India borrow beyond this particular amount of 1.2 lakh rupees from RBI? Definitely yes, it will be allowed. But please be very careful. Whenever Government of India borrows more than what is allowed or what is the limit fixed under WMA, Government of India will have to pay a higher rate of interest. And this particular rate of interest is a repo rate plus 200 basis points. What is the basis points here? 100 basis points is equal to 1% and 200 basis points is equal to 2%. Meaning is simply this. If Government of India borrows, let's say hypothetically, 10,000 crore rupees above and over 1.2 lakh crore rupees, then Government of India has to pay, if repo rate is 4%, it has to pay 6% rate of interest on such borrowings. Is it okay? So I'll put everything in a nutshell. WMA, ways and means advances, basically means the RBI will be allowed to lend for a shorter tenure or a shorter duration to both center as well as states. These particular states or center will borrow to meet temporary mismatches between their expenditure as well as the receipts. In case of central government, it can borrow for a period of up to 90 days. And if they borrow more than what is limited, more than what is allowed under WMA, then the government will have to pay a higher rate of interest. That is 200 basis points above and over the repo rate. This particular concept is referred to as ways and means advances. Now, in the recent times, as already mentioned, there is a huge pressure on the Government of India. The financials of Government of India are in a disarray. In order to provide certain relief to the government, the WMA limits have been increased. Don't worry about the percentages, because if you read the newspaper, they will say WMA limit has been increased by 30%, 60%, so on and so forth. The percentages are not important here. The concept is very, very important. So in order to provide certain liquidity or to provide certain financial assistance to the government, RBI has increased the WMA limit both for the central government as well as the state government. This is what is discussed in this particular article. Now, apart from this, you will also come across the concept of overdraft. What is this idea of overdraft? I stated that Government of India can borrow from RBI under WMA for a period of 90 days. Basically, it means if Government of India borrows today, it has to repay the amount in the next 90 days. What if a Government of India crosses over or doesn't repay in the end period or within 90 days? In that particular situation, RBI will classify this particular borrowing as overdraft done by Government of India. Okay, so these are the 2 points which are discussed under this particular article. Now, based on this, let's have a look at a question here. Consider the following statements. Under WMA, only the center is allowed to borrow from RBI. Wrong, we have already discussed, even the states are allowed to borrow from RBI. Under WMA, there is no limit for the government borrowings. Under WMA, there is a limit. The limit is fixed and RBI will charge a repo rate on this particular borrowing. Can Government of India borrow above this particular limit? Definitely yes, but that is not part of WMA. And the rate of interest charged on that will be 200 basis points higher than repo rate. So second statement is wrong. So right option will be option D. Both are false. Next question. Consider the following statements about WMA. Government can borrow under this for a period of up to 60 days only. Wrong. We have discussed this. It is up to 90 days to meet the mismatches in short-term cash flows. Anyways, this particular statement is wrong because the time period is 90 days, not 60 days. The borrowings under WMA attract rate of interest equivalent to repo rate. We have discussed this. This particular statement is correct. So right option will be option B. Only second statement is true. I've also given you a descriptive question. Write a note on ways and means advances. This could be asked as a straightforward question in GS paper. Now let's have a look at the next article, which is on different revenue sources which can be raised by government. Now we have seen over and over again that the finances of the government are very limited, or the Government of India is finding it very difficult to finance for these particular expenditures which are taking place in the present situation. This particular article has mentioned 5 different ways through which Government of India can raise the revenues or resources. Again, having said so, please understand this. These are just recommendations. You can pick up some of these particular recommendation, and if at all a question is asked in descriptive paper, you can quote these recommendations. Okay, so this particular article says there are 5 different ways through which government can add to its finances. First, it can propose a scheme for religious institutions. What they are referring to here is this. Religious institutions will collect money on large number of donations from the people, and these particular donations should be used for people themselves. So this particular article says that why doesn't Government of India convince these particular religious institutions to donate some of these particular money under PM CARES? The government should convince these particular institutions, attract these particular donations, and in return should give them a huge amount of a tax benefit. That is, the article says the government should provide 100% tax deduction to these particular donations are done by religious institutions to PM CARES. This is one way which can be used by the government to generate revenues. Second, launch an amnesty scheme. Very often you will come across this particular statement that government says there is a huge number of tax evaders in the system. Now, what do you mean by tax evasion? Please understand there are 3 technical terms. I'll focus on 2 here. One is a tax avoidance and tax evasion. The difference between avoidance and evasion is this. In case of avoidance, the taxpayer is misusing the loopholes in the system. They are trying to misuse and leverage this particular loophole and pay lesser taxes to government. Whereas on the other side, tax evasion basically outrightly means you are paying less amount of taxes using illegal methods. In case of avoidance, it is not illegal, it is unethical. Whereas in case of a tax evasion, it is illegal as well as unethical. For example, imagine a situation, annually I earn 10 crore rupees. Hypothetical number. Annually I earn 10 crore rupees, but while filing the income tax returns, I tell government I only earn 20 lakh rupees. And on this particular 20 lakh rupees, I pay income tax to the government. Now some of you will ask this particular question. So if you are earning 10 crore, how can you say only 20 lakh? Don't you think government will come to know that? Not necessarily. For a simple reason, majority of the Indian economy is unorganized. The transactions are cash basis, not account to account basis. So whenever the payments are done, let's say in the cash, where is the accountability in the system? how can government of India come to know what is my actual revenue if these particular monies are not transferred into my account, rather they are paid in the form of cash to me? So is there a possibility of evading tax like this? Definitely yes. Again, there are multiple ways through which we can evade the taxes. Those are not important here. All I'm trying to say is this: can the taxpayers evade the taxes? Definitely yes. So government over a period of time has been saying that one of the reason why government of India's tax collections are very less is because of the practice of tax evasion. What can be done by government in the present context? Why doesn't government of India introduce an amnesty scheme, wherein they will simply introduce a system wherein tax evaders are given an option to pay certain amount of a tax, and any case of a tax evasion against them will be dropped. Through this, they can generate certain revenues. Having said so, there are certain moral hazard argument against this also. Anyways, this is one recommendation. Third one, offer tax-free NRI bonds. That is basically government of India can issue bonds in which NRIs can invest. But more importantly, these particular bonds should be tax-free. On this particular bond, the income that is earned should not be imposed with a tax. Now, you will ask a question, why do you think NRIs will invest in such bonds? In the present situation, if you see, the whole global market is experiencing a turmoil. There is a huge uncertainty as well as volatility in the global market. And whenever such a system of uncertainty and volatility is a feature of the market, understand this, interest rates will be very, very low. Especially outside India, especially in the developed economies, interest rates have taken a hit now. In this particular situation, if government of India issues the bonds with comparatively higher rate of interest, that is, let's say hypothetically in the global market interest rate is 2%, just a hypothetical number. But government of India issues the bonds saying that if you invest, that is if NRI invest in these particular bonds, they would be getting a 4% rate of interest or coupon rate. Don't you think this particular rate of interest will be attractive for these particular NRIs to invest in? So government of India can collect huge amount of money by issuing these particular bonds which are tax free to these particular NRIs. That is the third route which has been recommended. Fourth route, settling disputes. One very important sector which has been mentioned in this particular article is the telecom sector. You must have heard of the issue of AGR, adjusted gross revenues. There is a huge dispute going on between the government as well as the private sector companies related to calculation of AGR. And as per the Supreme Court judgment, the definition of government of India is correct in relation to calculation of AGR. Now, this particular dispute has been going on for many years, more than 14 years now. The argument put forward by this particular article simply is this: if government of India goes ahead and collects these particular monies from the telecom sector, that is the pending dues from the telecom sector, some of the companies will be shut down. And in this particular situation where the market is in so much volatility and uncertainty, this is a very bad outcome or an image problem for Indian market. So what could be done in this particular context? Why doesn't government of India call these particular telecom companies and try to settle this particular dispute? Again, what will be the impact on the judgment of the Supreme Court? Will Supreme Court of India accept for this particular resolution? That has not been discussed in this particular article. What article basically says is, rather than going ahead and collecting these particular monies over a period of time, which will lead to obviously more uncertainty, volatility in the market and negatively affecting the customers also, why doesn't government of India call these particular telecom companies, come to a settlement and collect the monies from these particular telecom companies? That is fourth very important recommendation. And fifth, not related to revenues, but more related to the expectations. This article says state governments are bound to expect a certain assistance from the center. And that is the nature of the state government functioning over a period of time. They'll keep on asking for assistance from the center. Center will not be able to meet all the demands of the states, especially under the fiscal head. In this particular context, what should be done is that central government should ask the state governments to be more pragmatic. That is, rather than expecting every financial assistance from the center, why don't they basically curtail their demands? Why don't they relook into their various demands and be more pragmatic with respect to assistance that they can get from the center? So these are the 5 very important recommendations which have been provided. Again, I'm saying all these may or may not be accepted by the government. And overall evaluation of these particular recommendations has not been provided in the article. But anyways, if a question is asked in UPSC, you can discuss the NRI bonds, the concept of a tax amnesty. You can discuss settling of disputes, so on and so forth. So this is the gist of the article. Let's go to the next one. The problem of a falling rupee and the crisis that it is going to create for the corporate sector. First and foremost, please understand, over a period of time, RBI has implemented certain reforms or taken certain measures which has made the corporates in India or companies in India to borrow from the external market. I'll repeat the statement. RBI has implemented certain reforms which has made the Indian companies to borrow it from or borrow money from the outside market. One such very important reform which has been mentioned here is ECB, External Commercial Borrowings, under which again there are regulations imposed by RBI, but as of now just understand this, Indian companies or Indian corporates can borrow from an external market. And whenever these particular borrowings are done, they are usually done in, let's say, dollar or any other currency apart from rupee. And since dollar is a universal currency, I'm going to use a dollar in this particular comparison. This is one side. Second side, on one side, the borrowings of companies have increased. Second, the rupee has started depreciating. In this year itself, rupee has depreciated by more than 10%. This article says 7%, but later it has further decreased, that is further depreciated. As a result of this, overall, rupee has depreciated more than 10%. So when borrowings are very, very high and rupee depreciates, the repayment liability on these particular corporates will also be very, very high. Let me give you an explanation. Imagine a particular company X, that is an Indian company, has borrowed $1 from American market under ECB, External Commercial Borrowing. And when they borrowed, let's say hypothetically, the exchange rate was $1 is equal to 50 rupees. Now this particular company is supposed to repay this particular $1 today. And let's say hypothetically, today the exchange rate is $1 is equal to 70 rupees. So can you see the problem for this particular company here? When they borrowed $1, the exchange rate was 50 rupees. Now they want to return this particular $1, the exchange rate is 70. In simple terms, this Indian company has to shell out 70 rupees to purchase $1 to repay to this particular, the lender who is sitting in the external market. So the rupee depreciation, which has been triggered because of the uncertainty or volatility created by the pandemic, is spelling certain crisis for these particular corporates. As per this particular article, the external commercial borrowings for Indian corporates has increased by a huge amount. The numbers which are quoted here are, in the 2016, these ECBs stood at around $17 billion. I'll repeat the number here. In 2016, Indian corporates or ECB in case of India stood at around $17 billion. And by 2019, this has ballooned to more than $50 billion. So you can see that the liability of these particular corporates has also increased. But with rupee depreciation, this particular liability or the repayment will become a huge headache for these particular companies. That is one point which has been discussed in this particular article. Apart from this, they've also discussed another aspect of it, that is declining crude oil prices. Understand this, with rupee depreciation, obviously the import cost for the crude oil should increase. But what has happened is this. Apart from the rupee depreciating on one side, on the other side, the international prices of the crude oil also have declined. So this particular rupee depreciation to a certain extent has been negated by the decline of the crude oil prices in the international market. However, the article also mentions that this particular decline in the crude oil prices is a double-edged sword. It cannot be presumed that decline in the international crude oil prices is always good for India. Because on one side, with the declining crude oil prices, the remittances or in-remittances for India will also get affected. So these are some of the very important points discussed in this particular article. Now, based on this, let's have a question here. Which of the following measures have been taken to control the volatility of a rupee in the forex market in the recent times. VRR, voluntary retention route, yes, it has been taken by RBI. Dollar rupee swaps, yes, again this has been announced very recently by RBI. One of the outcomes is what? To control the volatility of a rupee in the forex market. And FAR, fully accessible route, this is another route or another measure which has been taken by RBI. One of the outcomes is what? Control the volatility of a rupee. So all the three are correct. So the right option will be option D here. The next article is related to ENAM, stands for E-National Agriculture Market. The article says ENAM has completed 4 years and there are certain points given to the performance of ENAM. Before looking at the points given in the article, what is the basic concept of ENAM? Please understand, earlier or even today we have this idea of a APMC, Agriculture Produce Market Committee. The whole concept is states will bring out these particular APMC acts. Under this particular APMC act, state government will identify certain commodities, that is agriculture commodities, which are supposed to be sold only in the APMC mandis or markets. I'll repeat it. The crops or commodities of agriculture sector which are identified by the state government should be traded in only APMC mandis or markets. That is a basic idea of a APMC. But there has been certain problem with respect to functioning of APMC. For example, farmers were not able to get right remunerative prices. In simple terms, they expect higher prices, but they sell these particular agriculture commodities in the APMC mandi. They are not getting the right prices. Why? There is a collusion between the traders as well as the middlemen or the commission agents when these particular commodities are sold. What do you mean by this? Let's imagine there is a farmer F. He takes his commodity to the agriculture market APMC mandi here. There will be a middleman. He is a commission agent. He is supposed to facilitate the trade between the trader or buyer and the farmer here. Is it okay? So these particular commission agents who are appointed by the APMC are supposed to facilitate the trade between the farmers as well as the traders. But over a period of time, it has been seen that these particular commission agents are more oriented towards getting more commission from the traders, as a result of which they will ensure that traders will get better bargain from this particular transaction compared to the farmer. In addition to this, there are also problems with respect to infrastructure in APMCs, such as a sorting, grading and warehousing infrastructure. There's a problem with respect to weighing the agriculture commodities. There's a problem with respect to charges which are imposed on the farmers for utilizing this particular infrastructure in the APMCs. The price discovery in the APMC mandis were faulty. That is, in simple terms, real-time price discovery was not happening. And the traders were supposed to get multiple licenses to trade in multiple APMC mandis. There were certain issues with the functioning of APMCs. So government, in order to promote this particular idea or in order to address some of these particular issues, has implemented a concept of ENAM, E-National Agriculture Market. In simple terms, the ENAM is nothing but a platform. It is a platform where multiple traders as well as multiple cultivators or sellers will come. Basically, there will be auctioning of the agriculture commodities. As a result of this particular auctioning, it is expected that traders will be able to get access to commodities from multiple states, multiple districts, multiple markets. And the farmers or cultivators will be able to sell their commodities not only within their APMC yard but also beyond their APMC yard. Interstate, intrastate transactions were facilitated through this particular platform. And more importantly, there is a transparency in the system. The farmers are expected to earn better revenues from the system. This is the whole idea of the ENAM. And this particular platform is maintained or operated by SFAC. SFAC stands for Small Farmers Agribusiness Consortium. Now, apart from this, the article also discusses that 585 mandis have been connected. 1.7 crore farmers and 1.3 lakh traders are on board of the ENAM system. Many of these particular farmers are happy because they are able to generate a lot of revenues by selling their commodities through this particular portal. Having said so, this article also discusses certain issues which are plaguing the performance of ENAM. That is, it says that there is a need to introduce a quality testing or infrastructure related to quality testing under the concept of ENAM. Because there is no quality testing, large number of retailers are still yet to get on board of this particular platform of eNAM. So one of the ways of attracting these particular retailers or large companies which are involved in retailing is by introducing the concept of quality testing of agriculture commodities. Next, some of the states which have obtained a certain money or capital from the center, assistance or grants from the center to develop infrastructure have not utilized this particular assistance. So the states will have to work hand in hand with the center and invest or develop the infrastructure in this particular concept. So these are some of the very important points related to eNAM completing the 4 years. Based on this, a question has been provided. Which of the following is the lead agency to operate eNAM platform? We have already discussed this. This is third one, SFAC. The next article is related to RBI policy of the rate cut. Please understand, in the last couple of months, especially in the last 2 months, RBI has taken the lead to change certain policy tools or to implement certain policy tools in order to overcome the impact of the pandemic. It has reduced its repo rate. It has also reduced its reverse repo rate. It has introduced LTRO. It has introduced TLTRO. So these are some of the measures which have been taken by RBI in order to ensure that whatever is the impact of the pandemic, to a certain extent it will be curtailed. Having said so, please understand this. The impact of the monetary policy on this particular situation will be very limited. For a simple reason, there are two sides to the market situation. There is a supply side and there is a demand side. Whatever reforms or whatever measures are taken by RBI can only have an impact on the demand side. It cannot have an impact on the supply side. For example, can RBI regulate or introduce new models of transportation? Can RBI ensure that cheap labor is available for the companies during this particular pandemic? Absolutely no. So these particular reforms which are introduced by RBI will not have a full impact or a huge impact on easing the present situation. It will have a very limited impact. Beyond this, RBI has taken certain measures, but these particular measures have not led to change in the financial system or have not had a huge impact on the financial system. Let me give you a simple example. RBI has reduced the repo rate. How much? Don't worry. RBI has cut its repo rate by huge margin. But this particular decline in the repo rate by RBI has not led to huge amount of a credit flow in the system. Because the objective of a repo rate cut is very simple. RBI will lend to banks. Banks will lend to companies. Is it okay? So what is the logic here? If RBI reduces its repo rate, banks should also reduce its lending rate. And when bank will reduce their lending rate, companies will take more loans, produce more, supply more, basically add to growth. I can understand the cycle here. But what is the present situation? First and foremost, companies are unable to sell their commodities in the market. Or in simple terms, consumption demand is very, very low. So companies might take loan. Again, they have not taken. All I'm saying is might take loan, produce and supply, but there is no demand. So what do you think companies will do with respect to their production? They will curtail or reduce their production. That is the first one. Second one, companies, even if they want to take loans, banks have become risk averse. That is, they do not want to take a higher risk by lending to companies in the market. Why? Banks know that the current situation is very difficult situation. Companies are unable to generate revenues. Obviously, they are going to incur huge amount of losses. And when they incur losses, repayment of the loans will become a problem. Banks' NPA will increase. Now government might say give loans to companies, but in future, some questions could be raised on the lending practice of certain banks. So because of all these particular concerns, even though the loans are available in the market at a very cheaper rate, that is RBI is lending at a very cheaper rate to banks, banks are not willing, are not taking huge amount of risk by lending to corporates in the market. Rather, banks are choosing to park their money under the reverse repo. What is the logic of reverse repo? Reverse repo basically stands for the rate of interest that is charged by the banks when they lend to RBI. In simple terms, this is the process here. Here is a bank. It will take some of its funds, park these particular funds, keep the funds with RBI. On this particular money that is kept with RBI, RBI will pay rate of interest. This rate of interest is called as a reverse repo. Again, I'm not discussing the technical concept here. I'm just giving you a layman understanding. Reverse repo is the rate of interest charged by banks on the money that they've parked with RBI. So what the banks have done, rather than giving loans in the market, rather than issuing credit in the market, because they've become risk averse, they have taken these particular funds and have parked these particular funds with RBI. And on this, they are earning interest. So these are some of the very important points given in this particular article. So these are the various articles as well as the questions related to these particular articles for this particular time period. Thank you. Have a good day.